Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, we are starting a brand new series where I do my makeup and talk about the history of a different fashion house. For today, I thought we could start off with Yves Saint Laurent. But before we go any further, let's take a second to grab our iced coffee or a hot coffee. Let's take a sip and let's get started. I was inspired by people that I see here on YouTube who talk about true crime while they do their makeup, but I thought I could do something a little bit lighter here on my channel. So we're going to go ahead and delve into different fashion houses, specifically ones that have their own makeup lines, and we're going to go ahead and talk about their history, their legacy, their mark on the world, and I thought this could be a lot of fun. I have to start off by saying that I do not own much Yves Saint Laurent makeup. If you are a fan of YSL makeup, please let me know down in the comments which items I should try out. I am definitely in need of some recommendations. When I think of YSL makeup, I definitely think a dark smoky eye, probably something with some shimmer. I think of a pretty intense eye look, maybe a red lip with it, who knows, we'll see. I don't really have that much Yves Saint Laurent clothing either, so I went with something that I thought maybe evoked the fashion house. I have several palettes here on the side and I'm going to go ahead and dip into these as I go. All the makeup worn today as well as the makeup brushes will be listed in the description box down below. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Yves-Henri Mathieu Donat Saint Laurent was born on August 1st, 1936. He was born to a well-to-do family in Algeria, which at the time was still a French colony. The first palette I'm dipping into is the Quiet Revolution palette from Chanel, and I am just going into this light color here as a transition shade. He grew up in an environment where men were men. It was a very macho, masculine, like the typical stereotype of a masculine man. And he absolutely did not fit in. He was effeminate, he was quiet, he was gay. All of these were not things that led to a very happy early childhood for him. He was born to a well-to-do family, so he didn't struggle too much financially as a child, but he also really never fit in. So he spent most of his childhood in not isolation, but definitely withdrawing himself from the world and just diving into his mother's fashion books, or fashion magazines, I should say. He would just spend his time in those catalogs and those magazines and just escaping, really. I'm going into this Tom Ford Badass palette now. I'm going to go into the darkest color here. So he spent most of his youth dreaming of Paris, and when he was 17, when he was a very young teenager, he actually became quite lucky because he was able to enter in a few competitions or contests, I should say, about design, and he submitted some of his own designs that he had made. And some of the judges for this competition included Hubert de Givenchy and Pierre Balmain. One of the other competitors in this contest was Karl Lagerfeld. Imagine being able to be a fly on the wall at that time, just to observe what was happening. It also seems as though women's fashion is a bit of a boys' club, doesn't it? Interesting note, Yves Saint Laurent actually beat Karl Lagerfeld in the dress category. There were different categories for this contest, and Yves Saint Laurent came in first for the dresses. So then at that time, Yves Saint Laurent decided to just move to Paris. That was his dream. He wanted to study fashion and design, and what better place in the world to do that than Paris? So that's where he went. And lucky for him, he started working directly under Christian Dior. Wow. Okay, so once Saint Laurent got to Dior fashion house, he had a very, very small, minimal role, which is to be expected. It's basically as if he was an intern. So his jobs were pretty menial and lightweight, but as the seasons progressed, he kept just submitting more and more sketches and just being very persistent and perseverant and just always giving his sketches in until eventually it led to something great. Eventually, after some time, he was finally noticed and given a spotlight. Actually, when Christian Dior retired at an early age, he appointed Saint Laurent as the head of the fashion house, which is quite remarkable because he was only 21 at the time, and that seems like a very intense position to have at 21. I mean, I know most of us in our youth like to think that we're going to be at the top of our field at a very young age, but that's rarely the reality of things. It's usually a very long time before we can get that sort of title and recognition. So Saint Laurent got basically his dream job at the age of 21. However, Saint Laurent's time at Dior fashion house would only last a few years, and they were some bumpy few years. So he came out with a collection in 1958 for the spring summer collection, and it was raved, and like everyone thought it was beautiful and groundbreaking, and it just went over really well. The next collection, fall winter, not so much. It was hated. Everyone hated it. Everyone thought it was horrible. It was like all the reviews, the critics hated it. It was an unmitigated disaster. The fashion house was hemorrhaging money because, creating a line is very expensive. And if no one buys it, then the investors are not really happy. At the same time that this was going on in Paris, Algeria was going through a war of independence with France. There are rumors, allegedly, that there are certain powers that be who were pushing Yves Saint Laurent's draft because he was Algerian born. Technically, he was French Algerian, so he was supposed to be drafted or conscripted into the French military, but when he was at the Dior fashion house, apparently, allegedly, don't come for me, there may have been certain higher powers who delayed his draft. However, once he almost tanked the fashion house, those powers kind of did the opposite. And shortly after his disastrous fall-winter collection, he was drafted into the French army. His military career lasted 20 days. It is reported that when he was in the French military, he suffered through some hazing and then had a mental breakdown. I think the stress of army life, the stress of being removed from Paris, the stress of having a huge career failure, all of that compacted just led to a break. I mean, how could it not? He was immediately transported to a psychiatric hospital where he received some electroshock therapy, and Yves Saint Laurent would later claim that all of his mental health problems stemmed from this one visit at the psychiatric establishment. And Yves Saint Laurent was fired from his dream job at the Dior fashion house. Okay, so after his 20-day military career, after his mental breakdown and recoup, I guess, he and his partner, Pierre Berger. Now, Pierre Berger is a business, or was a businessman, and he and Yves Saint Laurent had a business partnership, but they were also romantic partners, and they were together for over 40 years. But at this time, they were still business partners, and so with that help, Yves Saint Laurent decided to sue the Dior fashion house, and he won. And so with that, with Pierre's help, he was able to become financially independent, and they were able to create the Yves Saint Laurent fashion house. I'm just dipping into this burgundy color here. And I think this is really when things kicked off for Yves Saint Laurent. I mean, he was finally independent. He was finally able to create the sketches that he wanted. He had artistic and creative freedom. He wasn't working for anyone else. He didn't have to run his sketches by anyone. He didn't have to beg to, have his designs be created. He was in control. And these two really became a power couple. I mean, in every sense. So they were able to create this beautiful fashion house. And I think really through the 60s and the 70s is when you have peak Yves Saint Laurent fashion. I think they created their most iconic looks in these 2 decades. And I know we think of Yves Saint Laurent as being, I don't know what you call it, but just like a pillar in fashion. But it's really quite remarkable, all the groundbreaking work that he did. There are so many things that we take for granted in fashion now that didn't used to be. Saint Laurent popularized safari jackets. I know this sounds so mundane, but I remember loving those when I was in high school. And it's just wild to think that at some point in history, no one wore this as a normal look, but now that's a pretty regular look to see. He also popularized the beatnik look, which I think is fantastic. He also popularized the wear of tall boots on women. And I think we have to obviously say that the most iconic fashion look that Yves Saint Laurent created is le smoking. This is a tuxedo worn on a woman. Again, this is something that we take for granted because every red carpet, we see a woman wearing a beautiful tuxedo. It's fitted. It often has like a very plunging neckline and it's very beautiful. But until Yves Saint Laurent did that, no one was wearing this. And this was just a look that really, I think this is more of a 70s look, the le smoking. I mean, there were people like Bianca Jagger. When she married Mick Jagger, she wore a white le smoking by Yves Saint Laurent. It was that iconic. And of course, we can't forget the Mondrian dresses. These are these beautiful geometric dresses that have this beautiful bright pattern inspired by the Mondrian painting. I just think it's so cool. And it's funny that at some point in time, these things didn't exist until someone put it out there in the world. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up here because it's getting a little bit out of hand, and then I think I'll skip to the face makeup. So for the foundation, I'm going into my Chanel Ultra Le Teint in B30. So all of that aside, there are still 2 very important things that Yves Saint Laurent did to contribute to fashion that I think he's the most known for. The first one is popularizing the ready-to-wear or prêt-à-porter. So at this time, there were other fashion houses that were talking about having their ready-to-wear line be mainstream and have it in boutiques, but Yves Saint Laurent was the first one to just announce it officially. So I don't think he was the only one at the time, but he was the first. And so what this meant is it just democratized fashion. High fashion is really avant-garde and it's not something most people can wear, and even the ready-to-wear lines are not something that everyone can wear anyway. But at least the ready-to-wear fashion lines are a little bit more accessible. And so he definitely popularized that whole trend. Now, when we think of fashion houses that have boutiques, we kind of take that for granted. Like, of course, there's a boutique that you can go to normally. But at the time, that wasn't really the case. And so when Yves Saint Laurent opened his boutique in Paris, one of his first customers was Catherine Deneuve, who is a French actress and singer, and she was his muse for a very long time. For the concealer, I'm going into my NARS Creamy Radiant. And the second thing that Yves Saint Laurent did that was considered groundbreaking was hiring models who were not white. At the time, it was practically unheard of to use anything except white models, and that's still a bit the case today. But he was really the first to feature women of color in his fashion shows in his magazine spreads, and he would also find inspiration from different cultures and incorporate that into his runway looks, you know? I mean, now when we think of that, we think of it as obvious that's something people do, but at the time, it was really groundbreaking. People did not use non-white models to show off high-end luxury clothing. It was not something that was done, and he really helped pioneer that. So this is the 1960s and 70s. Things are going so well for Yves Saint Laurent. Fashion lines, prêt-à-porter, high fashion, ready to wear. He's everywhere, literally. Everyone is wearing his Le Smoking. Unfortunately, at this time that his career was going super well, his personal life was a little bit rocky. He was very known for his jet set party lifestyle, and he used and abused a lot of illegal substances. I can't really say which ones because YouTube will demonetize me, but he was known for using illegal substances, and mixed with the trauma and mental health that he'd had basically his whole life, like from childhood, his time in the military, and his use of illegal substances, it was not going well for him mentally. It's in the late 1970s that he created one of his very iconic perfumes, Opium, aptly named. And this was, I don't know, when I think of the 1970s, when I think of Studio 54, I think Yves Saint Laurent, because he was at Studio 54 all the time. I think of Le Smoking, I think of Opium, and also something to be noted about Yves Saint Laurent fashion in the 70s is he was known for creating long, sleek lines. So when you think of dresses with like spaghetti straps and just like a long line, just like either a Le Smoking or a dress, that was very Yves Saint Laurent, and that was very late 1970s fashion as well. I'm going back into the dark color from before from the Tom Ford palette, but I'm going to go ahead and use a tapered brush and trace it under the bottom lashes. So as the 70s turned into the 80s, his lifestyle started to catch up with him. He had pressure to create his high fashion line as well as creating his ready-to-wear lines. He had to do 2 of those every year, mixed with his mental health problems and his self-medicating. He ended up being hospitalized again. You know, I think that sort of rock and roll party lifestyle is a lot of fun until it isn't. And I think Yves Saint Laurent learned that the hard way. There were a few instances in the 1980s when he had shows, and usually when there's a fashion show, at the end of the show, the designer will come out and just wave and thank everyone. And there were a couple instances where Yves Saint Laurent could barely hold himself up. He needed to basically use models as crutches because of the self-medicating. He was just not in a good place. So following a disastrous collection in the late 80s, he decided to leave his ready-to-wear line to his assistants and basically just like delegate that responsibility to someone else because the pressure from work, his self-medicating, it was really getting to him. So for this look, I feel like I'm going to use a tiny bit of bronzer, but not very much, because most of the photos that I've seen of Yves Saint Laurent makeup is women wearing a Le Smoking, which I do not have, but it's usually very dark smoky eyes and maybe a nude lip. So I'm going to go ahead and just do like a hint of bronzer. This is the Givenchy Healthy Glow Bronzer number 3. I'm going into a blush. This is the Chanel Jersey Blush. I'm going to go into this Chanel single eyeshadow. This is the Première top coat in number 317 Carte Blanche. I'm going to go ahead and just dot this on the inner corner here. And then to finish up the eyes, I'm going to go into my Chanel Stylo Yeux number 88, just a black waterproof liner, and the Volume Stretch Mascara. So in 2002, Yves Saint Laurent decided to close the Haute Couture YSL. Now, if you would like to see a truly beautiful fashion show, I highly recommend watching the YSL Spring Summer 2002 fashion show. It is the last one. It is the last show that Yves Saint Laurent created. It is his last designs, his last sketches, the last time he walked in a fashion show. And you see some truly iconic models walk in this show. It is very moving. It's very beautiful. It's a bit sad. It's melancholic, but it's really, really nice. And I highly recommend you watch it. So for the lipstick, I'm going to go ahead and mix this Chanel Camellia Rose and this Dior Lip Maximizer in Rosewood. After his retirement, his health continued to deteriorate, and in 2008, he passed away. A few days before his death, he was able to get a civil union marriage with his longtime partner, Pierre Berger. They had been together for over 40 years by this point. Unfortunately, at that point in time, France did not recognize same-sex marriage. There was a separate civil union, which I think is very stupid, but now in France, if I'm not mistaken, you can actually have same-sex marriage. Pierre Berger, when talking about his longtime partner, said that Yves Saint Laurent was born with a nervous breakdown, and I think it's funny that sometimes our partners know us better than we know ourselves. The funeral was quite a star-studded event, and the president of France at the time, Nicolas Sarkozy, and his wife Carla Bruni were also in attendance. Pierre Berger would later scatter Yves Saint Laurent's ashes in Marrakech, Morocco. They had bought property in Morocco earlier because it was a place that they both fell in love with. They loved the nature, the gardens, and they had a beautiful botanical garden. So Pierre Berger decided to scatter Yves Saint Laurent's ashes there, and hopefully this place finally gave Saint Laurent the peace of mind that he was never able to get here in life. Naomi Campbell, when speaking of Yves Saint Laurent, said the following: "He had a twinkle in his eye. I think he was the first designer to put women of color on the catwalks, and I'm so grateful to him for that, for giving us a chance to be there. Every other designer has been inspired by him in some way." Yves Saint Laurent was famously quoted as saying, "Fashion fades, but style is eternal." I think we can learn a lot from this because fashion comes and goes, trends come and go, and just because a trend is in fashion doesn't mean it's very flattering to you. So I think it's very important to cultivate your own personal style regardless of whatever fashion trends are popular at the moment. I feel a bit melancholic now that I finished this video because so much of what Yves Saint Laurent created was truly beautiful and remarkable and so groundbreaking, but there seems to be an aura of melancholy or sadness around him. I find it very touching, and I think that there are so many people like this who are highly creative, who also unfortunately suffer from mental health problems. I hope that in today's time, people are able to reach out and talk to those that are close to them. I hope that people who are gay or part of the LGBTQ plus community are able to be accepted and live the life that they want to. I wonder if Yves Saint Laurent was born today, how different his life would be. But anyway, that about does it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I think it's a lot of fun. These videos do take a bit of time to research, so I would really appreciate it if you would share this video with your friends, share it on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever, even just email it to a friend, because these do take quite a bit of time to do research, and I really like this type of video, and I will definitely do more of these. It might become a weekly occurrence on my channel. I'm not sure yet, but if you have any fashion house in mind that you would like me to do a video on, please leave a recommendation down below. If this is your first time on my channel, whenever I get a luxury collection, I only focus on luxury makeup, by the way. And when I get a new collection, I will create several different looks with the same products. That way you guys at home really get a sense of how to use up your makeup. So please like, comment, and also subscribe. That all helps my channel grow. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.